We said meh. M-E-H. Meh.
Oh look. Two more mediocre movies. One that was kind of expected, and one that guarantees hate mail. It's not to say that these movies are bad, but I'm not going to say they're good movies either. The one that guarantees hate mail is the first Incredibles. I'm sorry, I used to love this movie as a kid, like everyone else did, but during my 2 rewatches on Disney XD, it made me sleep. It was boring. The score was annoying, the characters aren't funny, the animation has poorly aged rendering that overpowers the great unique character design, and the story did have amazing setups, but the second act ruins the movie for me, due to the abundance of pointless filler that was thrown at it. I had the misfortune to sleep during the third act, because the middle was too slow-paced. The pacing of this movie was terrible. Like I said, I'm not saying this is a bad movie. It has a great concept, like most Pixar movies in the 2000s, stellar voice acting, some iconic moments, nice dynamics and the most gruesome Disney villain death, so I do see a good chunk of the appeal for The Incredibles. I understand why most people like it so much, but for me, it was boring and overrated. The one that's expected to be mediocre is A Bug's Life, which is a carbon copy of Seventh Samurai with bugs, like what Ben the Looney says. It's hard to get anything I can say about it, since it's been 10 years since I have seen this film, but what I can remember is a story and cast of characters that I just didn't care about. The animation is fine, for the most part, but everything else is just not interesting. Enough said about the okay movies, and let's get to
Thank God for the honorable mention.
the honorable mentions. Now, these movies are instant classics, and they're iconic for a reason, whether it be the fun stories, the groundbreaking animation that holds up to decades later, the introduction to iconic characters, or the solid comedy that can oppose the pop culture references and toilet humor of other studios. I'm not saying these movies are perfect, but that's why they're here and not the top 10. I'm going to be talking about the pros that made them good movies, and the cons that keep them away from being the best. With that said, and in chronological order, here we go. Toy Story, the first computer-animated feature ever made whose visuals only aged well on the toys and backgrounds. The Humans and Sid's dog, not so much. Monsters Inc. Instead of scaring kids like horror or kaiju movies, their laughter is what this movie's after. Finding Nemo, the Gen Z's introduction to the overprotective parent trope in animated movies. Cars, the movie that got me the most into animation, and gives me early childhood nostalgia. A literal high-flying adventure that came second for getting an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. Toy Story 3, speaking of Oscar nominations for Best Picture, this one got it too. And it also has an entire scene that offended me as someone on the autism spectrum. Coco, the Pixar version of Disney Animation's Encanto that celebrates the Day of the Dead without copying the Book of Life. And last but not least, Luca, a spicy meatball that pays homage to Studio Ghibli's filmography and any summertime friendship you think of. The 2 movies I just mentioned are so good that they almost made it to the top 10, since they turned out just as amazing as the first half of that top 10. But unfortunately, it is a top 10 after all, not a top 12, so they didn't make the cut. Otherwise, all of these movies are worth a shout-out, because you can't do a ranking about one studio without mentioning all their movies. Or else the ranking won't feel right. I know there's movies that haven't come out yet, as of the spring in 2022, but I'll always keep track of them after this ranking.